Hey guys, it's Bryan.
Hey, I'm Nate.
Hey, I'm Barry.
And welcome to the Collecti-Bros podcast. This is the first episode of our mainline series, Is It Worth It?, where we discuss 5 topics, including the story, the gameplay, the graphics, the sound, and the price/collectability. The first episode is about Jack Bros. I picked this game for the first episode because at the time of this recording, it's the, quote, most valuable game in my collection. I also think it's just a super interesting and unique game. A lot of unique ideas, principles behind it. We'll get into all of that. But first, let's start covering some basic history. So Jack Bros was released in Japan of September 1995 and the United States in a more appropriate October 1995. It's a Virtual Boy exclusive. This game was developed and published by Atlas. This game is part of the Megami Tensei series, and it's the first time this series was introduced in the United States. It is interesting of note that some of the characters' names were changed in the US. My assumption would be 90s Nintendo censorship. For example, the working title of the game was Devil Busters, but it got changed to Jack Bros because, we can't have demons and all that stuff in Nintendo Land. Certain characters' names were changed, such as Pyro Jack is now Jack Lantern, Jack the Ripper is now Jack Skeleton, and Beelzebub, my favorite, is Belzoff. It's tough to find exact sales figures for this game, but being that the Virtual Boy was 770,000, I'm pretty sure this was pretty low.
It's hard to imagine this game breaking 1 million copies sold when not even 1 million copies consoles sold. So.
Right. It's a pretty unique game as far as the trying to pin it down and categorize it as what type of game it is. I would say it's part maze, part dungeon crawler, part twin stick shooter, depending on the character you pick. You guys have any thoughts about that? Like, what's the best way to categorize this game?
I think it's a top-down dungeon maze game. I think that's the best way to put it. It's got shoot-'em-up elements to it, but when you're walking around with a knife, it's hard to call it a shoot-'em-up.
Right, like certain characters definitely make it feel like a twin stick shooter, even with the controls. We'll get into that a little bit later. But, I think action game, adventure games, probably the most appropriate. It's got some arcade elements to it too. Also, guys, full disclosure, we did play this on original hardware. It's my copy of the game, and it's my Virtual Boy with a sweet broken stand like 90% of the Virtual Boys out there. We rigged this thing up nice. We all had different ways to get comfortable playing the damn Virtual Boy, putting our lives and bodies on the line for you guys as entertainment.
Breaking our backs.
That's right.
Breaking our necks.
Roasting our eyeballs.
My favorite was Barry's technique. You should touch on that. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, to start off with, Bryan had 2 cardboard boxes set up, and then the Virtual Boy set up on top of those. And we all tried to kind of squat / kneel / cross our legs and play it while you kind of lean in. And I was like, forget this is uncomfortable. So I laid on the floor and I balanced it on my face. And I had no back pain. So it worked pretty well.
So let's dive into the story. Full disclosure, the story is not very complex or very deep here. I know it's unusual for the Shin Megami Tensei games, but you guys gotta think this is a portable spin-off. This isn't part of the mainline games. This isn't an RPG. The story is honestly probably the weakest aspect of this game. However, I do feel like it's pretty interesting that the story is incorporated into the gameplay. But just a quick summary here, a rundown of the story. It's Halloween night, and it's the one night of the year that fairies can come to Earth through a portal, but it closes at midnight. The Jack Bros realize it's 11 p.m. and kind of go, oh shit, we have an hour to get back to hell. Like, what are we going to do? And a fairy comes by and she's like, hey, I know a way back, but it's kind of dangerous. And there's your story. There's not a lot to it. Like, Barry, you're a big RPG story fan. Like, what gravitates you to this riveting story?
Not much.
Yeah, there's not a lot.
I don't have much more to say than that.
I think you guys are really missing the parallels of our socio-political climate that the story actually... I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
no.
There's not a lot of meat on the bone here for the story, guys. I will say there are 3 characters that you can choose from, a 4th if you beat it on hard. They all kind of play and feel differently. They all have their own ending when they beat the game, but it's just, a quick little cutscene, maybe a minute tops. You guys can YouTube those if you want. Like, spoiler alert, you make it back, like if you beat it. However, it is interesting. There is a secret ending if you beat the game with X amount of time remaining. So yeah, the Jack Bros themselves, even, they're not even really fleshed out here. But it is what it is. As far as the story is concerned, there's not a lot more to talk about here. Unfortunately, this is a portable game. There's not going to be a lot to eat here. I think the collectability aspect and some of the gameplay elements are really the most interesting part of this game.
I mean, they definitely obviously worked on the game more than structuring a story.
Right.
I mean, it's like you're taking an arcade game and slapping a story onto it to justify anything of a backstory of what's happening. It is just an arcade game with a generic story attached to it.
And that's okay sometimes.
So with that being said, let's move right along to the gameplay. Honestly, pretty pleasantly surprised with how addictive / fun this game was. We said it earlier, it's kind of hard to pin down what kind of game this is, but we'll do our best to describe it for you guys. So at the start of the game, after you experience the brilliant story and all the planted seeds, you're able to pick one of 3 characters. They all play differently. You've got the fan favorite Jack Frost. He's fast and he shoots snowballs. His special ability is that he can freeze the entire screen. Not my favorite character to play as. You guys have thoughts about playing as Jack Frost?
He doesn't have a knife.
Spoiler.
I don't think I played as Jack Frost. I think I went straight for Jack Skeleton.
Yeah, I dabble with Jack Frost, and I wasn't doing enough damage for my liking. He does move fast, but I was like, I need to cut.
Right, so like every character's got a give and a take. Jack Frost, he's the weakest, but he's fast, and he shoots projectiles. The next character is Jack Lantern. He's a little bit slower than Jack Frost. He does more damage, and he shoots fireballs, and his special is that he damages everyone on the screen. I literally just kind of messed around and played the first level with him. He's a good middle ground between the 3 characters, but not my favorite to play as. So lastly, there's Jack Skeleton. I think we all spent the most time playing as Jack Skeleton. He's the most fun to play as. The unique thing about him is that he's melee based. So he has a knife. He does a ton of damage, but the flip side is you have to get right up in the enemy's face instead of having that space to be able to shoot projectiles. And his special is that he insta-kills everybody on the screen when you push the button, except for bosses, obviously. Any thoughts on having fun with some Jack Skeleton?
He's pretty awesome. I mean, he wasn't very quick, but you could literally just walk around and stand with the knife in front of you, and if anybody touched the knife, they instantly died. I think there was maybe a couple enemies where it took more than one hit to kill them. Like, didn't the Cyclops take more than one hit?
Those damn Cyclopses, yeah, they did.
Yeah, but like Jack Skeleton basically insta-killed everybody as long as you could touch them. So he was a little overpowered.
Right, and the major, disadvantage with him is that he's the slowest character. And
he has no range.
Right, yeah. In full disclosure, you're timed in this game. Like I said, based on the story, you have an hour to get back to the portal. So the time is a timer, but it also serves as your health. So if an enemy hits you, you're going to lose some time. Now, the cool thing is if you do eliminate an enemy, they will sometimes drop time power-ups, upgrades.
Yeah, they're kind of like little droppable items you pick up. There's other upgrades other than time. I think there's one that increases your speed. But there's a speed drop, and then obviously some of the enemies will drop items that give you time, and not every single drop is the same amount of time. They vary depending on, I believe, which enemy it was.
Yeah, and the cool thing with time in this game, kind of touched on it in the beginning there, the time is actually your health in this game. Found that really cool. I usually am not a fan of being timed when I play games, even arcade style games. It's not my jam being timed. I like to go at my own speed, but I think it worked for this game. Especially it's cool how they incorporate it kind of into the story even. So kudos for creativity.
Yeah, the whole thing with this game, you can beat the whole game in about an hour, maybe an hour 20.
If you're good.
Right, yeah. Yeah, full disclosure, we didn't beat it. We got to the last level. So as far as actually playing the game, the basic outlier is you start on a top floor of a dungeon. I guess it's a dungeon. You got to work your way down. A tower maybe is more appropriate. And you
it's almost set like, imagine like Diablo, I suppose.
Yeah, it is.
Or instead of going up in a tower, you're going down.
Yeah. So you start at the top, and you have to work your way down, but the only way you're able to advance to the next floor is if you grab all of the keys on that floor. There's a mini map to the right on your screen, and there's illuminated dots, and that serves as, hey, this is where the keys are. So your objective is to grab these keys, and then you'll be able to fall down with a pretty sweet 3D effect onto the next floor. When you reach the bottom floor, you're going to face a boss. So every floor you drop down, they'll add a new twist. Maybe it's a new enemy. Maybe it's a new trap. Also, every floor you drop down, the fairy is going to tell you exactly what they're adding that's new, which kind of slows the game down for a minute. So it's kind of weird that you're timed, and then it's going to stop you dead in your tracks and be like, hey, do you see these spike strips? Those will hurt you if you walk over them. So it's an interesting tidbit. But I mean, it's nice that they do kind of explain things to you. And it's also interesting if you play on hard as the fairy, it's the only way you can skip this dialogue. Like, let's say you beat the game and you load it up with a different character. Yeah, you're going to have to sit through these tutorials every single time you play it.
I will say the game does a good job of kind of easing you into it and then kind of pushing the pedal down, where the first world, I think, is 5 floors, and then the second world, I think, is 10 floors, and then it progressively gets more floors on that world. But as you progress through those worlds, like, you can't save anywhere. There's no saving option mid-world. So you kind of have to hope you can get through the world, beat the boss, and then once you've completed that, it gives you a password where the save is a password system. Every single character and every single difficulty has a different password. It's a 4-digit password. So if I want to go back in, once I beat World 1, it says, hey, here's your 4-digit 1234 to revisit unlocking World 2 with Jack Frost. And then unlocking World 2 with Jack Skeleton is 4321. So it does differ depending on what character you use. Obviously, back when it came out, there was no database list of these, so you had to play the game to get them, but it's not an auto-generated number also. They're preset in the system. So obviously, you can go back now and find a walkthrough that has the entire list of all of the passwords, where you can immediately go to World 5 with Jack Skeleton on hard. You don't have to play all of them, but it is an interesting system that they decided to use.
Yeah, it's also interesting of note. So when you select your character, you can't select a different character unless you use the password system. So like once you pick, whoever you want, until you die, you start the game over. That's the only way you can switch characters. I do think it would be interesting if you could switch characters mid-game, because there's some traps and stuff that are definitely beneficial if you're a certain character. The one that stands out in my mind, there's a certain room, I think it's on the 3rd level, where you're just basically bolting forward, and there's 2 stones on each side of you, and as soon as you pass them, they try to smash you. And being the slow guy with the knife, it was not ideal. I mean, you could do it, but I was like, man, I wish I could be Jack Frost in this level, just because to get past that obstacle. There is some strategy involved when you pick a character. Like, there's give and take. You have to decide with what you're comfortable giving and what you're comfortable, having difficulty in return.
I thought the game was paced really well. It never felt overwhelming. It never really got too lost. There's parts where it's a little chaotic, but that's part of the fun. I thought it was designed pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's like fun, addictive gameplay. Like, even when you fail, you're like, oh, I want to try it again. Or maybe I can switch characters and try this character instead. There is a weird kind of like arcadey addictive element to it. Or like, let's say, there was a point where I was just killing every enemy possible to get as much time as I could for a boss. There is a certain level of strategy to it in an interesting way.
Yeah, I kind of do enjoy the fact that they took this game where you could theoretically beat it in an hour, 2 hours, and give you the option to play it with a different character that has different stats and has a different moveset. And yeah, the levels may be the same, but the way that you approach each level is going to be different depending on which character you choose. So once, we got through World 1, World 2, World 3, you're like, okay, I want to go back and try it with a different character, and it's going to feel different. And it's kind of going to give you that replayability and that almost value to revisiting the game multiple times instead of just playing it through once and being like, all right, I'm done. Because there's those games where they're the same thing every single way through, especially with arcade games. Like, that's how people were able to, get high scores on a cabinet, is you memorize exactly what happened at any moment in that game. Every single screen you had to memorize to get a high score. especially with competitive players. So this one kind of changes it up a little bit depending on that character. So there's not like one real way to play the game. It's all about what you're more comfortable with as a player and who you vibe with more on those levels.
Alright, so with the gameplay established, let's get into the controls. Again, the Virtual Boy controller, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's pretty unique in the sense that it has a D-pad on the left side, a D-pad on the right side. It's got bumpers towards the top, and there's only technically 3 buttons you use, but you can use either bumper for the special attack. The A button's your fire or your stab if you pick the stabby man. It controls like a twin stick shooter, so the left D-pad makes you walk. The right D-pad's where you aim to shoot/stab. And it's interesting because it very much like a twin stick shooter, if you're walking one way, you can shoot/stab the other way. So it's beneficial sometimes, like if you're going down a hallway and the enemy runs up behind you, you can pull the knife behind you as you're walking forward. I thought that was a pretty unique aspect to this game. I can't think of a single other game where it's like, yeah, let's slap the controls of a twin stick shooter on a game that isn't a twin stick shooter like Smash TV is.
Especially a little weird being a twin stick shooter and a dungeon crawler almost.
Right.
It's an interesting combination.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience on the Virtual Boy controller. I own one, but I'd be lying if I said I plug it in and play it every day. Like, I very, very infrequently, but it was very intuitive and it was pretty easy to figure out what was going on the second I started playing, so.
Yeah, I think the controls, they serve their purpose. It's not overly complex. Again, this is a game you can beat in an hour, so I don't think we need this convoluted control scheme. There is no customization options, but I don't think that really matters unless you're, dominantly left-handed and you want to walk with the right stick and aim with the left, but I don't think that would interfere with anything. The controls are serviceable. They do their job.
Yeah, I will say the controller is pretty tight as far as the controls go. So anytime I was doing anything, I felt it was very responsive for when I needed it to be. Maybe it's due to the fact that the screen is inside of the unit where there was no lag input. So anytime I was playing and I tried to do something, it would do it when I would want it to do it. And if I got hit by something, it wasn't because of a controller issue, it was a user issue. So it gave me the ability to be like, all right, I got to go back into this and do better, instead of being like, oh, the game sucks and the game won't respond to me and the control layout's horrible. Like, the controls are really tight, and as simple as they were, they kind of needed them to be that tight in order to successfully have a game that you can play and not be frustrated with just because of poor coding.
So yeah, another thing to know about the controls, if you're picking Jack Frost particularly, you don't have to keep jamming whichever direction you want to fire in. You can just hold the button down and he's going to give you a steady stream. So Jack-O-Lantern, he's kind of got a burst, but you can still hold the button down and fire in that direction. It's a continuous fire instead of just absolutely destroying your D-pad / your thumb.
Does Jack-O-Lantern do almost like a fireball wave?
It's like 3.
So it's like a burst.
Like a burst fire, yeah.
3 bursts, okay.
Which is nice, because when I play any of these type of games, like, if there's not an ammo conservation mechanic, I'm holding that button down while I move and walking around. Like, I was constantly walking around with my knife out, whatever direction I wasn't facing, because I wasn't going to let anybody sneak up on me, so I thought it felt nice.
Yeah, I either had it in front of me facing my direction, or if I saw someone running up, I was like, nope. And I was still able to advance forward. It's pretty slick. The controls are pretty tight for this game. So on to the graphics. In my opinion, this is one of the most interesting and strong aspects of this game. If you guys have any sort of familiarity with the Virtual Boy, there's no color. It's red and black, and you get 3D. Like, you can't turn it off like you can on a 3DS. Like, you've got an adjustment for 3D, but other games I've played on the Virtual Boy, it's usually a hot mess. Like, if you've played Waterworld, if you've seen Waterworld, you can make out your boat and everything else is kind of like, is that something coming at me? Like, what is this here? But for this game, I think it does a really great job with the 3D. Even when you first fire it up and you see the text, it's more of a layered effect instead of just like, in your face 3D, which is nice because if you guys have any experience, even with like modern like VR, right? I think when it's more subtle, especially in something like this where there is no color to give you that extra layer of depth. It does a much better job of presenting itself for this game, particularly like when you're jumping down between floors and you get that effect where it's like you do have a sense of falling because of the levels of depth. And like there's cool certain subtleties where you think the 3D would kind of distract you from the game, but it's super clear the whole time. I actually had we had this thing hooked up when we were playing it, and I had a buddy come over, and he's never seen a Virtual Boy in his life. And he's like, "What's this thing?" And I'm like, "Well, hey, if you want to play this, kind of hard to find game, it's the only chance you're going to get." He's like, "Screw it, let's turn it on." And the first thing he said was, "Man, this 3D is really clear and looks really good." And he's like, "Why is it red and black?" And that's a whole different conversation, but it's interesting for this game to look as good as it does with the limitations of the Virtual Boy. I thought the 3D was crisp. I thought the actual graphics, the pixel art themselves was nice. Nate, do you have any thoughts or feelings?
Yeah, so with my experience with the Virtual Boy, I can't sit there and play it very long. My eyes start to feel like they're bleeding. I get headaches. I didn't experience any of that with this game. So major props to how the art direction was in this game. Yeah, it's like a shadow box effect, so it's not as overwhelming or eye bleeding. It's very subtle, and it really goes a long way. I think with Virtual Boy specifically, like, less is definitely more. The other games I played on it tries a little too hard to like let you know you're playing a Virtual Boy game. This one's basically is like, yes, I'm on Virtual Boy. I'm here to be nice and subtle, and it works way better in the long run. I think also when you kind of make your graphic style 2D sprite based, it's going to age a lot better than 3D. Like Waterworld tried to go for a 3D effect, and it looks pretty bad now. But this game looks great. I think the sprite designs are clever. They look good. You can tell what everything is by looking at it. It doesn't leave a lot to your imagination, which is good when you're literally in the screen, like up in it.
Yeah, I was very impressed with this game. I'm not a Virtual Boy owner. I don't generally have a desire to play them. I've played a couple of games like Mario Tennis. I think I played Mario Clash. And before, every time I've experienced a Virtual Boy game, I'm just like, like it just kind of hurts after 5 seconds. But this game, I was very impressed with how long you could sit. Like Nate said, it is very subtle in the way that it moves. It's not rushing at you. It's not making your eyes try to look at 20,000 things at one time too quickly. It does blur a little bit when you pick the speed item power-ups as you go across the screen, but it's not anything crazy. So to me, for something like this to come out in 95, I feel like is pretty impressive comparatively to the VR that we have now, which is mostly the PlayStation VR and the Oculus is kind of what we have. And even with the PlayStation VR, I don't know how much experience you guys have with that, but I know I cannot sit with that for very long. It makes a lot of people sick very quickly.
Yeah, it's weird. For me, it's like I can play it. I don't get like motion sick, but as soon as I take it off, I feel like I'm either like falling or like I'm just zooming through a tunnel with like, it's like eyes are locked and it feels like your eyes are like widening. It's such a weird effect.
I generally have to like recalibrate myself after I take the headset off and like factory reset. So
yeah, and we have a friend who has an Oculus, and I believe he's got also a PlayStation VR, or he did at some point. But even I asked him when he got the Oculus, I'm like, how long can you sit with this thing? And he said he can sit with it for hours and be completely fine. So 1995 Oculus Virtual Boy, but only with certain games. It definitely didn't translate with a lot of the other games because I think they tried to do too much. Especially with like the flight games where it's all rushing at your face. So the 3D was very subtle in this one. Very impressive. The pixels are very clean. Also, the red and the black is very hard to pull off sometimes, especially if you get too much red with not enough variation in like the value of it. So if you're not getting darker tones in certain spots, it's going to just be bright red and deep black. I've seen a lot of games on the Virtual Boy where they don't really do that too well and everything kind of muddles together. So it is kind of hard to see the background versus the foreground versus your sprite because it's all kind of the same shade. But this one, like especially on the lower floors, like the floor that you're on and the floors under them, they're darker. So they kind of, the floor you're on pops out from the rest of them and you don't get them confused. It felt three-dimensional, but not like they were trying too hard.
Yeah, for me, the only real negative was I think it was when you picked up the speed power up. I don't think it was a result of shoddy sprite work or anything. It was some of the spike traps, you couldn't see them clearly, and I don't think, like I said, I don't think it was the game's fault. When they were more off screen, right? So like when you're right on top of me in a dungeon, you see obviously you're going to see the one that's like 2 steps to the right or 2 steps to the left. Most of the time when you're speeding through, it's the only time I ever lost focus. I don't feel like that was Spriteworks' fault. Spriteworks great. I mean, the bosses are big. For a quote portable game, I feel like all the sprites are pretty detailed. You can tell who everybody is. Like Jack Frost looks like he's supposed to look. They did a pretty great job with the limitations of what they had to work with here. This giant turd, the Virtual Boy.
I want to give a special shout out to the Cyclopses. I think their sprite was very cool, and then the 3D effect they had when they stomped around was very cool. It added just a little extra, oh crap, what is this thing I'm about to fight? And then you see him and you got to go up and hit him a few times. It added to it. It was a cool, nice little touch.
Yeah, they were almost like mini bosses. I think the first world where they were introduced, before you even see the Cyclops, you hear that noise where they go
stomp, yeah,
and the whole screen shakes. And at first you're like, oh god, what is ahead? And then you see the Cyclops is walking around, and I remember, I feel like one of you guys was like, there's no way I'm trying to avoid him. I remember me going and being like, I'm gonna try and fight him. I don't know if he's even like, is he invincible? I don't know. I remember we had the stab guy, Mr. Skeleton, and the first stab did not instant kill him. And we were like, oh no.
There's a difficulty spike.
Yep.
Like when you were saying, Nate, there's that effect of the screen shake or you are running fast. The 3D never got blurry. It always looked smooth. It always looked clean. Like they did a great job with what they could.
I mean, there was a speed smear, but it wasn't anything.
It wasn't intrusive.
Horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was expecting much worse from a Virtual Boy.
Right. The beginning cutscenes was really good, too. For the very little amount of cutscenes this game had, the opener and the title screen graphic cutscenes look really, really nice for what this game was.
So about the sound for this game, my opinion, probably the second weakest aspect of this game. And truth be told, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just, you have the limitations of the Virtual Boy, right? So as far as your character sounds, your stabbing, shooting, enemy sounds, minus the Cyclops stomp, I think that was cool. That was a standout. But it's lots of beeps, lots of boops, nothing crazy. I think the music was probably, I'm not going to say it was amazing, but pretty nice for a Virtual Boy game. Every stage had its own sound, its own song, and it never felt repetitive or never felt, oh, here's this song again. Yeah, nothing inherently wrong with it, but I don't think it's particularly memorable. I mean, you're not going to get, Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger music from this game, but serviceable, does the job much like the controls. What's your thoughts, Nate?
Yeah, I think serviceable is the right word for this. I mean, everything felt in place. Nothing felt like, why would they pick that sound? It was all very, felt like it matches naturally with it, which is, when your face is dug into the actual thing, it's the speaker's not far away from your face like a Game Boy. I want it to sound normal and familiar because it's kind of a wild experience when you first throw on a Virtual Boy and the sound's not matching. You're going to pull your face out of it and look around like, what was that? So the speaker with Virtual Boy also, it's pretty loud. So you're up in it. So to have the sound design almost be background is kind of important to me. You don't want it to be too much center stage. It's more about the visuals, the gameplay itself. So the music I thought was pretty good. I thought it was a little better than just like Ho Hum, but I don't think you're going to have anything in your Spotify playlist, but it was serviceable too,
I don't know. I didn't think the music was horrible, but for what we lacked in story, I wish we would have made up somewhere else. And I wish the sound was a little bit better. There's not any memorable tracks for me in this one. I don't really have any that when I heard them, I was like, oh, this is really good. It was just kind of background music. To compare this game to an arcade game, there are so many arcade games out there that are all about their music. I mean, that's kind of what you are attracted to when you go to an arcade, is like you walk by a cabinet and you hear this awesome music play and you're like, whoa, what's this? Like, not even just the visuals, but the music too. So to compare this game to an arcade game, I really wish the sound was a bit stronger, especially if we lacked it in the story. Especially with the limitations of the Virtual Boy, I I want to compare this to a chunky Game Boy it's like a beefy Game Boy, but still with Game Boy speakers. When you listen to this, it's not anything better than a Game Boy sound quality. It's not, I mean, it was their first 32-bit console, but like, are we getting 32-bit sound out of this too? I don't know. And it didn't sound like it. And a lot of the times when they port, Super Nintendo games or Nintendo games to Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Advance, you get a sound loss. And it felt like I was getting that sound loss in a console. So the sound, maybe it didn't sound great just because of the hardware or whatever speakers they chose to put in it or whatever sound chip was in that system. But it was pretty weak, and I wish it was a little bit stronger.
I think it's an interesting point when you brought up the arcades because, yeah, the music, it is important. But I think if you look at arcade games, there's several I can just think on top of my head with like just iconic sounds, right? Like Pac-Man dying, the startup sound jingle for Pac-Man, Cubert falling into the arcade cabinet. It's a really good point. You think that they would at least have more than the only one I can think of off the top of my head is the Cyclops Stomp. Like that was cool. That was a nice effect. But I also think the graphics complemented that and that kind of added to it. If the sound by itself, it's like, all right, something stomping around. The screen shaking with the 3D was more of like the full effect for me in that regard. That's a really good point, Barry.
And it's interesting, like, it's not that, hey, this was an arcade game originally and it was ported to this console. I mean, that would be a little bit different, where if it did start out as an actual arcade cabinet game that was meant for that purpose, they probably would have put a bit more time into the sound. But this was made for the Virtual Boy and the Virtual Boy only. We did not get this anywhere else. It didn't originate from a cabinet at all, or a PC, or anything like that. So to kind of compare it to arcade is unfair in a sense. But the way that this game is structured, I also feel obligated to compare it to arcade. So
it's oddly somewhere between a Game Boy and an arcade cabinet. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's very odd. It's a very odd like combo.
But that's the Virtual Boy in a nutshell, right?
For real, it's really just an amalgam of a console.
I mean, it's a shocker this failed, with all things considered.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with the limitations that they had. I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm bashing the sound horribly, but story and the sound are the weakest part of this game. And I think the most interesting part of this game is kind of the legacy. So let's talk price/collectability aspect of this game. So the going rate as of now for a loose cart is about $800 to $900. If you're wanting a complete in-box copy, it's going to cost you $1,500 US. However, the last one sold on eBay was $1,200, and I'm pretty envious of that. Even though it was kind of an ugly copy, but I am after a box for this game. It's the last piece I need. I do have the manual, so I mean, if that's the only box I can get, I would jump on it, but that's still a pretty ugly box. However, the interesting part of this is that there's a Japanese version of this game, and it is much more affordable. The Virtual Boy is region free, and I don't think having a Japanese copy of this game is going to ruin your experience as far as if you want to play it. I know there's people that just want to, put their pretty little piece on the shelf and not play it. I'm somewhere in the middle ground of that. I know, Barry, you're more in the, playing the games you own, which that's good. You're saying I'm not. But yeah, you can get a complete in-box copy of the Japanese game for $80. But where it really gets interesting, I think, is the difference between the box art for the games. So the Japanese version, it has your, the Jack Frost that you know from the Shin Megami Tensei series. And he's kind of chibi, he's kind of cute, but he's, still a demon.
Yeah, he's like a cute little looking like a stuffed snowman with a hat and gloves.
However, the US box art, it just totally leans into the horror trope. And dude, it's metal. Like, I love the US box art. You've got the 3 Jack Bros stand there. They're looking awesome. They're looking menacing. They're looking scary. And I think it's an interesting contrast to have both these box arts kind of reflect, the audience that they're selling it for. Because, I mean, Atlas isn't a huge publisher. And, this is for a Virtual Boy. It didn't sell a lot. So I think they did a really great job with making the US box art stand out and look awesome and sell itself to the US audience.
I mean, it's really interesting to bring up the box art when you're talking about an Eastern and a Western release. I mean, if you want to look at what they did with Dragon Warrior and Dragon Quest, like the box art that we got in the West is a lot more of like, I don't know, a weird European fantasy style Dungeons and Dragons, because that's kind of what RPG players were into Dungeons and Dragons in that style. So when you're going to push over an RPG to the West, they're going to take that into consideration and change the styles for that market. So that's kind of what happened with this game, and it's not really an RPG sense, but you take what the Eastern box art got and then consider what we got. Like, they're trying to change that for a market. The Eastern style box art is going to appeal more to an audience that's already familiar with this, and especially this being the first game that got pushed over in the West, they're going to have to make something a bit more generic that Westerners will kind of relate to.
Yeah, it wasn't really marketed as like, hey, this is part of it. No, like they didn't have the rest of the series to bounce on, so it was very standalone, and you can tell from what they went for.
Right. I mean, we had no idea what Megami Tensei was. This was the first one, and they didn't market it as Megami Tensei, so we got no idea. This was before Persona came out on the PS1, so you got to think that we had no exposure to this whatsoever in the West.
Right. They just had this kick-ass box art, and they're like, look at these scary monsters on it. And it's funny because when you flip it over and the screenshots are on the back, they're just all chibi style art, the pixel from the game. So it's an interesting parallel and contrast there.
And it begs the question if it would have sold better or worse if they had kept the box art, or if they, kept the change. I'm curious on what would have happened.
I'll just say, me personally, if I was a kid and I saw those monsters on the front, I'd be like, give me that. I don't know what that is, but I want it.
See, if I was a kid, I would have preferred the other one.
Yeah.
So
I'm just a huge horror nut, and I'm like, this looks scary. But then when I played it, I'd be like, what the hell is this game? So, yeah, it is interesting.
Definitely does not match the gameplay. Like, I would have been really disappointed when I opened it and got home. But it's really hard to do cool cover art on a Virtual Boy box anyways, because the limitations of the box has to be very square. And you have to have that sweet, like, almost Master System-esque grid behind it.
I'm honestly just a sucker for, like, painted art, box art. Takes me back to the olden days instead of just having generic copy and paste art like we get now. I think it was a really cool, unique box art, and it looks like it's hand painted. Like, I know a lot of the Game Boy games came out with a poster. Like, if this came with a poster, like, I'd hang that on my wall just because I think it's cool and spooky. So this leads us to the biggest question and the title of our series. Is it worth it? Nate, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think it's kind of an interesting question to begin with, because it really depends on what type of collector you are to begin with. We touched on it. We're all very different collectors here. I'm somewhere in the middle between you guys, where Barry's only going to have it if she's going to play it. Bryan, you want to own every game ever made for every system. So I kind of feel torn between both at times. This is a game that I had ever since you acquired it. It's kind of been on my radar. I think it's cool. I enjoy collecting weird stuff too. I think if you're a collector that is purely going financial, I think this game has a ton going for it. In a sense, it's a horror game. It's Atlas. It's from a huge franchise that's just continuing to grow. It's probably at an all-time high right now. And it's actually rare. It's scarce. There's a lot of games that claim that don't really hold that candle. This one is one of those games. It's rare. I don't see this game out and about. For me personally, it's a steep price. I think it's worth it overall. I'm probably more prone to pick up a Japanese copy before I pick up the NTSC one, but yeah, it's a game I really want to own someday, and I can't say it's at the top of my list of like, I'm going to go out and buy this once we're done recording, but it's definitely up there, and it's on my radar for a couple of years now. So overall, all these uber expensive games, they're just not fun. They're expensive because they're rare, or because a lot of people want them, there's some mystique behind them. This one was actually pretty enjoyable. If I'm going to hook up my Virtual Boy and play a game, this is what I'm probably going to grab. So overall, I'm going to say yes, it's worth it. Barry, what do you think?
So this game is very interesting. It has a lot of things going for it in terms of why it may be a collectible item. So if someone's buying this game for $1,000, they know exactly what they're getting into. Nobody drops that much money into something without really knowing why they're buying it and feeling confident in it. To me, this is not something that I would purchase. If they ever release this digitally, I would totally pick this up, because I think it would be fun to play on my Switch, but like, I'm not going to spend that much money to put it in my collection. You do have to think about it's really hard to track how many of these there are out there that exist. This came out 2 months after the Virtual Boy was released, and then the Virtual Boy was discontinued anywhere from 6 months to 18 months after that.
Crazy.
So and then who knows when they stopped printing Jack Bros. I mean, they tried to dump this right before holidays and it tanked. This was Q3 going into Q4 and did not sell very well out here in the West. And I want to say a lot of that has to do with the PlayStation 1 coming out the year before this. Like, why would I buy all of this stuff when the PlayStation 1 came out in 94 and we've got all these crazy games to look forward to and, a three-dimensional sense in that. So its downfall has something to do with that and what came out in the same time period. Also considering the Virtual Boy didn't sell very well. Obviously, the games are not going to sell very well. So if you can track down a copy and people pay that price for it, I feel like that is a good investment. It's probably worth that price, and it has potential to be worth more in the future. I'm never going to say, oh, that was not worth it, because the potential for this game to rise even higher it's so possible. So, especially with right now, we're at the height of popularity of Persona. We're at the height of popularity of Shin Megami. So people are going back and being like, I want to have everything in the library from them. I got a feeling some of the old Super Famicom games are going to go up in price too. I got a feeling that the Virtual Boy Japanese copy of this is going to start going up in price a little bit too as well. So it's something to keep an eye out. And if this is something that you really want for your collection, I would say go for it. I do think it is worth it. If you're a Shin Megami Tensei lover and you like the Virtual Boy and you like Nintendo and you want kind of really low print, very unique items, this is something that is worth it, and it can go higher. Personally, it's not to me. That's a lot of money for not a lot of gameplay. So I would love to play this virtually if they ever did it again.
Yeah, what a complete damn shame that the Virtual Boy is the only way you can play this unless you
sail the seas
and do your thing on them. We actually had a friend that played it on an Oculus, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, he emulated on an Oculus. I'd be curious to see for myself what the 3D effect difference would look like in between the two.
It's got to be the only way you could even remotely get close to replicating the experience.
Absolutely.
Which is pretty awesome. That's where we're at with VR technology now.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty cool because my gut tells me that they're never going to release this, but I think it's perfect to have. I mean, you look at some of the things, Konami's doing, particularly they had the Turtles collection coming out. They already did the Castlevania and the Contra ones, and those two have Game Boy games. I'm not sure if the Turtle one does, but missed opportunity here. I think you could do a compilation of maybe some of the old Famicom games. Throw this on there. I think people, we were all pleasantly surprised when we played this, how actually fun this game was. I didn't have super high hopes going in, but I enjoyed my time with it. This is the first time I got to play it, and I was playing it. I was like, man, I wish I would have done this sooner. This is actually pretty fun.
I don't know. It's hard to say what Atlus does as far as a company goes. I mean, we know how Nintendo feels about keeping their games alive. They don't care. They'll drop that library very quickly and don't care about the conservation of anything. I mean, we basically have the Switch shop at this point. Anything prior to that doesn't really exist. So Atlus isn't really a Nintendo company or a Nintendo primary company. They have things released on other consoles. So we've never really had or seen how they treat their older games.
Well, I know with this series, they're kind of going back and remastering. And
you're right. They've visited more. They've got all the Persona 1 and Persona 3 on the portable. They redid Persona 4, but I mean, we're not going any older than that. Yeah, that's the thing.
No, like the MSX.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Games are on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect opportunity for a compilation. Either that, or it's a damn shame this wasn't on the 3DS eShop. I mean, you've got 3D, missed opportunity, Nintendo. Come on. If this was 5, 10, I'd say even 15, you could probably get out of some people. This would have been perfect on the 3DS. As far as, is this worth it in my personal opinion? For me personally, yes, because I want to try to get a complete Virtual Boy library, and this is the big boy you want to grab. This is the crown jewel of the Virtual Boy library. Also knowing what I paid for it, I mean, I got a pretty good deal on this game. paid $200 for the game and the manual. So pretty grateful and just honestly kind of privileged to own it. I am trying to get a complete Virtual Boy library, and this is like, all right, I can do this now that I have this. But not to repeat what you guys said, I do feel like this has a lot of room to grow. It has tons of things working for it. It's Atlas, it's low print. Shin Megami, I'm not going to bore you guys with that again, but yeah, you guys are absolutely correct. I think there's definite room for this to grow. And again, I think adding to the only way you can play it legally is if you have this cartridge and you have a Virtual Boy. I think that also adds to the, mystique of this game and why people are seeking it out. Plus the internet with meme culture. I know this game's kind of become sort of a meme with people, quote, claiming it's the best Shin Megami game, and people are intrigued by it. So it's a super unique game with a lot of just weird, quirky things going for it. For me personally as a collector, like, it checks a lot of boxes. I like weird, unique, like head-scratching items in my game collection, and yeah, this is definitely one of those. So I'm not you guys' financial advisor, so don't listen to me. I'm not telling you to go out and buy it, but I don't think it'd be the worst decision ever. I do think there's room for this to grow.
So, Bryan, you own it, and then Nate said you would like to own it in the future. Like, this is something that you would buy. Would you guys also buy the Japanese copy? Do you have an intention of buying both?
So I'm a sucker for cover art, especially if it's like in a language I can't read or understand. Obviously, with this game, that's not as big of a deal, but yeah, I would totally buy both. If I was a huge into the series, I'm not super educated with the series, but if I was really into it, no question, I would already I intend to buy the Japanese version of this game, especially if it's still under $100 at time of recording. That's a pretty good deal in my opinion. So I'm going to probably grab a Japanese one pretty soon. It's not going to stop me from, or make me question if I should go out and buy the NTSC one once I kind of feel comfortable to do that. There's just a couple more games right now I'd rather have than a $1,500 Virtual Boy game, but it's on the horizon for me, and I would own both for sure.
If this game was garbage, would you still want both?
Different story. Yeah, I think that's a different conversation. I actually really enjoyed playing this game and making this episode with you guys, so I'm even more prone to kind of buy it than I was before, honestly.
Yeah.
So
me personally, like I said, I am going for that complete library, so I would buy it regardless. But honestly, the way I got it's really cool way too. Like, I don't remember if one of you guys tipped me off when you guys were working at the local game store.
I think it was Nate.
Yeah. But like, I was at a car show with my dad across the street, and I was like, I wasn't even hunting for games, and it's like, hey, there's a banger of a game in here, like, and it's super reasonably priced, and like, I know you're a Virtual Boy guy, like, come get it. Like, super cool memory just to, find a deal. Even back then, like, it's still cool to find something like this. This is the only US copy that I've seen in the wild. So like, I had to pull the trigger. My thought is like, I'm never going to see another one. And it has the book too. Like, yeah, I'm pulling that trigger $200 every time.
Yeah, I bought 3 Virtual Boy games that day. A guy brought in a collection. You could tell it was a collector because like, they all had manuals. They were all very well kept. Like, your copy is very minty too.
Yeah, my cartridge is pretty clean. My book's got some dings in it, but I mean, you're going to. But Barry, to answer your question with the Japanese, yeah, I think I do want that because, yeah, I'm a sucker for variant box art. And I mean, $80, that's complete with like the insert, all the different manuals. Like $80, I feel like is I feel like there's room for the Japanese version to grow, honestly. I mean, I know there's probably more copies of it out there, but it's got, more iconic Shin Megami art on it. I think there's definitely room for that too. And why not? The more Virtual Boy games on my shelf complete in the box, the merrier.
I mean, even then, that's 770,000 worldwide. So it's not like that was one country who purchased that many consoles.
I mean, like $80 has got to be one of the cheaper games in this series at this point, because like even the handheld ports are expensive. Like everything for that series is so expensive right now.
It's funny to think about the vast price difference between both of these games. Like, and especially the fact that this has nothing of a story.
Right. You don't need
why are we paying this much money for an NTSC copy? Like, I'm going to sit here and still say like this has value and will probably still go up, but oh my God, that's what, a $900 difference?
Yeah, I don't care how much you love something, $1,500 that's a big pill to swallow.
Oof.
Again, guys, I'm not your financial advisor. If you just want to play the damn game, buy the Japanese copy, because the cart itself, like loose, is like $20 shipped. Not a bad investment if you just want to play and experience it. It's not going to hinder your experience. unless you can read Japanese, you're going to miss about how they can't get in this portal till midnight. That's all you're missing, literally.
You got YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
Your timer's still a number.
The timer is still a normal number that you can read.
Right.
If you want to play this game, get the Japanese copy. If you want this game as a high-end collectible, still consider NTSC. Brian, does this get the stamp of approval?
Yeah, stamp of approval, Collecti-Bros. Psh, it's a brand. So what are your guys' thoughts? Actually, we'd love to hear it. Part of the fun of doing this podcast is that this is a conversation I'd be having with two of my best friends, recording or not recording. And we'd like you guys to join us in that. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, the Twitter, and TikTok at Collecti-Bros Pod. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think. So Barry, what's next in the pipe?
Next episode, we have a list of games each of us have chosen for the IPs we would like to see resurrected. Intellectual properties that have died or have may been lost to the times that we would like to see come back. Whether it be a remaster, a reboot, a port to a new-gen console, a sequel, prequels, anything in that IP we want to see come back. So, next episode, IPs we would like to resurrect.
And also, thanks for listening, and we're going to see you guys in 2 weeks.
Quick. They have to be quick, bro. Boom, boom, and
honestly,
boom.
I haven't played in a while, so I don't remember names
We'll
and
let him
shit.
go last. So it's
Kill's easy, right? They do it for you.
No, who would... Man, you don't know the basis of this game. All right, Nate. Marry, fuck, or kill Final Fantasy VII.
Listen here. I'm absolutely marrying Tifa because that's the correct answer here. I'm gonna fuck Cloud because that's the stamina, like, it's a good looking dude. And then as far as kill, I would like oh god, what's his name? He almost dies and the tower collapses. He's like the big dude. You find him like in the rubble. Kill Wedge. It's annoying. Die.
You got it, Barry.
I found him quite annoying, more so in this game. All right, so that's a tough one between two of them. I'm gonna marry Tifa.
Absolutely, the right answer.
I'm gonna fuck Zach.
I'm just fucking...
Maybe. It was between him or Reno. Reno is tough. I mean, realistically, I just want to fuck Tifa too, but
Yeah,
I can't pick
can't
for
have
two
her
categories.
taking it,
Say if you're married, you have that opportunity multiple times.
I'm trying to... I don't know. Vincent's on there too, man.
Oh shit!
Oh no! You know what? All right. So it's gonna be we're marrying Tifa. We're fucking Vincent, and I'm gonna kill Kate Sith because I fucking hate him.
I'm gonna defend fucking Cloud because he's not gonna be like emotionally attached to you afterwards. It's just strictly business, and you can move on with that and get back to Tifa.
You say that though, but he is so emotional.
That's because he was like traumatized, not.
He's a big
love.
old softy.
It's because he's got
He is.
two people.
He
living
may
in his
bone
head.
you and be like, "Ooh, I'm emotionally attached."
But as soon as I bring Tifa, he's gonna be all nervous, like, "Oh." So get away.
Vincent can transform.
Vincent can transform. That's the thing.
Vincent can transform.
That's the thing. Dolphin shit.
Or Cat She, if you want to pronounce it right. But he's Kate Sith to me as a kid. He's Kate Sith to me now, but he's still gonna die.
I might change my answer to Vincent.
Yeah. All right, Brian.
I'm not familiar.
If you're not familiar, you can look up there.
I know Tifa. I would say I played the original Final Fantasy VII.
That's all you need to know.
Right. I mean,
The main cast.
yeah,
the main
marry
9.
Tifa for sure. I think it's unanimous. There's obvious reasons there. She's fine. Kill, like, doesn't Sephiroth make this decision for you?
A lot of people would bone him.
Sephiroth's awesome, man. I ain't gonna kill him, but I'm talking about he makes the kill for you.
Got that long sword.
You don't have a choice. She dies, bro.
So you're killing Aerith? That's pretty fucked up.
That's fucked up.
That's
Aerith's
pretty fucked
an
up.
She
angel.
already has it coming.
She's an angel.
Does she? Because I don't even
my
know in the new
God,
series.
That's true. The new one. Or were we talking about the original game?
Well, I'm
I was talking about the
Because I say I've not. To be clear, I've not played the remaster, and I played on fucking PC
All right. Well, okay. So the remaster
years ago.
The remaster ends. It's not even a remaster. It's a remake. It ends
Remake, yeah, you're
basically once you hit the open world. You leave Midgar.
Jesus.
So if that puts it in
So
perspective
it's
on how
literally
much
the
story
beginning
is
of the
out there.
fucking game. There's tons of meat on
Yes.
the bone left.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So
We don't know
Meat on the
anything.
bone.
Not to spoil anything, but we have no idea where this is going.
Yeah.
So there's not really a wrong or a right answer.
Because don't they change Sephiroth and shit? Like, isn't he like not?
you don't have to play the game, Brian.
How would you play it, Brian? It was
Yeah.
one of the best decisions.
One of my favorite villains, like awesome fucking villain in the original. Like, just menacing.
Yeah, but are you fucking him or marrying him or killing him?
You know what?
Fucking him. I'm fucking him.
Fucking Sephiroth?
Fucking
One
Sephiroth.
wing angel, bro. Gets fucking play with that little nub.
So you're marrying Tifa.
Yeah.
You're killing Aerith.
Yep.
And you're fucking Sephiroth.
Final answer. Final answer. Yep. Like I said, I haven't played the remakes. It's basically off the original. But
Fucking nub.
yeah, dude.
Sorry, that got me.
Oh my god. Oh my god. I may get blasted for saying Kate Sith, but I fucking hate him. I hate him so much.
It's crazy.
So goddamn annoying.
Never played the PS1 version of Final Fantasy VII. I've only played it on PC.
Colin Vincent, the transforming really sends it over the edge.
He's a hottie. He's a little hottie.